Now, on the market open, one thing that kept us later into the day or into the show was trying to watch President Trump and Zelensky do their press conference together. And unfortunately, we were not able to stay long enough in order for us to watch the press conference happen. But oh boy, did it happen. We got something that went down. Rather than me talking, I'm going to play the video of what happened, and then I will recap a day that I think will go down in history as one of the more fiery exchanges when it comes to the United States and Ukraine. Here you go. Here's what has happened today.
It's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come to the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
That.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this.
I'm not
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. Yeah, you're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. It's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
No, in this
even
entire
today.
Meeting, you said thank
even
you.
Today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Okay, so obviously this was the craziest shit I have personally ever seen. I mean, maybe there's some crazier shit than this, but it was kind of wild. I don't think anyone has seen this type of engagement publicly between two officials. It reminded me of 2018 with Trump and Pelosi and Schumer together as they were negotiating the new budget, which ended up leading to a shutdown because they couldn't negotiate for it. But that was pretty fiery. I did not expect to see this happening with Trump and Zelensky. Now, why did it get that intense? You might be wondering. Well, this wasn't shown in the video. We're going to watch a couple more clips of it. But essentially, Vance started talking about diplomacy and why diplomacy is so important. And Zelensky questions him, and he's like, what diplomacy are you talking about? Russia's like killing our people. And that's when Vance starts getting a bit more upset, and he's like, why are you acting like we're not trying to be engaged in diplomacy? Why are you being disrespectful? Yada, yada. And then it turned into what we saw in those final 2 minutes. As a result, the press conference that was supposed to happen, because that wasn't the press conference. That was just like a public showing of both leaders together. There was supposed to be an actual press conference like how Trump did with the UK PM yesterday. That was canceled. And Trump put out on Truth Social, he said, I don't want advantage, I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America, he being Zelensky, and its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he's ready for peace. So you got Trump basically saying, hey, this is not happening. And as a result, we didn't end up getting the signing of the proposed minerals deal, which we talked about in the morning. That didn't happen either. So I mean, it was just a crazy, crazy day, dude. Every single business, media, and news channel. I wish we were live for it, but unfortunately, the conference or whatever, the exchange of dialogue that they had ended up happening way too late into the day, so we weren't able to cover it live. But once I saw it, I was just like, I have the same reaction as everyone else. It was just like, holy crap, like, is this actually happening? There's a bull and the bear case on the dialogue from the comments that I read. The bull case is that Trump is standing up for people. He's putting America first. He's actually engaging in public discourse that the Biden administration never did. They never showed us the actual conversations that they were having with these leaders, and that he's putting America first by basically saying, hey, you can't treat us like that. And if you want to get a deal, then you got to get a deal done, and you got to like work with us, not be disrespectful towards us. The bear case on that entire interaction was it was childish. The way he was acting is a way that people shouldn't be seeing public officials act in public. And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, so even though he says he's putting America first, the entire allyship of the United States, which is mainly Europe and the Western part of the world, is looking at this, and they are obviously not happy that Trump is essentially treating Zelensky like a child. I mean, it was almost like he's like putting him down in front of the media and making it seem like he's bigger than him. I've heard both perspectives over the past 2 hours. Some people who just love it because they finally are getting that type of exposure to how Trump should be negotiating in the right way. And there's other people that feel that this is the most childish way for a president to act. Nonetheless, this is definitely what happened, and it's just kind of insane to see it play out. We got about 5 minutes until the market closes. In terms of what this meant for the market, well, markets you would think would hate it. Not really. Not really. The S&P 500 right here is up 1.46% on the day. NVIDIA, I bought my final shares of NVIDIA, by the way. I bought 10 more shares at 121. So NVIDIA right here, 124.55. I now have 600 shares of NVIDIA. But NVIDIA right here up 3.7%. Tesla 291. Rocket Lab came back from the depths of hell, 16 all the way to 2036. That's up 2.6%. Robinhood, $50.24. You got Google going green at 172, and you've got Palantir as well, slightly red, about to go green in 5 cents, 84.71 on the day. So you might be asking yourself, why the heck is the market going green when we just saw that type of exchange between Trump and Zelensky? And that exchange obviously being pretty aggressive between both of them. So why would the markets go green on that? Honestly, I think the market is ready to be done with February. Like, I think it actually has nothing to do with the Trump exchange, although that is a big deal. But if the markets care that much about it, aka if the markets care that much about having a negotiation or a path towards peace, which is essentially what the markets thought they would get with the press conference today, they didn't end up getting it, obviously. I think they would have tanked harder on that press conference and the lack of signing on the minerals deal. It seems like they didn't care. It seems like they didn't care, and that's why we're seeing markets kind of recover towards the end of February and potentially end a bit more green than they were before. On top of that, in the morning, we also got some breaking news around GDP growth. So the Atlanta Fed put out this study saying, hey, we think GDP is going to be negative in the month of, or in the quarter of 2025, the first quarter of 2025, negative 1.5%. Now, while this is bad on the headline because it looks like recessionary, right? If we have a negative quarter that's contracting in terms of growth, I don't think the market reacted to this either, because we would have seen more red than we're seeing right now, because the contraction was based primarily on a sharp drop in net exports after the latest trade data. Let me say that again. The way the Atlanta Fed is estimating this GDP towards the negative side is based on a sharp drop in what they are estimating to be net exports after the latest market trade data. Well, why are there going to be less exports? Because everyone already loaded up a ton of products, aka they already imported many of those products in Q4. Why did they load up in Q4? Because they were afraid. They were afraid of tariffs happening in Q1, right? And so it actually kind of makes sense why that ended up going negative. So the market didn't care about the negative GDP headline. They didn't care about PCE this morning, which thank goodness came in line with expectations. And as of what I'm seeing right now, 2 minutes until we end out February, they also did not care about Zelensky and Trump engaging in the way they did. So although it's been a kind of crazy day, kind of tracking all this play out, it does make sense that we're getting a bit of rebound here. It's Friday. It's the end of the month. I think the market's just done with some of this selling. You got sellers that definitely look exhausted, and you got prices that got pretty cheap enough for people to get excited to get back in. But an absolute wild freaking day as we end out the month of February. We're going to watch a ton of more clips on that Trump-Zelensky exchange. I also want to get everyone's perspectives and thoughts on what they thought of it, if they thought it was good, bad, what it makes America look like. But absolutely wild day, wild exchange. And it happened literally 2 hours ago, and the markets are trying to ingest that news and see what they can make of it. All right, here we go. About 20 seconds left until we end out February. It's been a rough February towards the latter half. It looks like a lot of green as we get into the end of February. Hopefully this green can continue into March, but it does look like we are ending out a little bit more green, at least from 2 weeks ago, based on what we're seeing as we get into the final seconds of February. Here we go. Friday, February 28th, 4 p.m. The stock market is now closed. All right, there you go. We are done with February. We are done with the stock market for February. If you survived February, congrats. It's been a hell of a month, but we are done officially with what seasonally is one of the worst times of the year for the stock market. NVIDIA ends out the day up 4%, 125.05. My average is 125.32. So nice little recovery intraday, up about 4.08%. Again, still down from where it was on earnings, but you're getting some buyers to step in. Robinhood ends out the day, $50.10, ends out February at $50, up 2.71% of the day. The S&P 500 ends out green, 1.5%. Hell of a green day on the S&P after the 3% decline we had a couple days ago. 593.70 on the S&P 500. Palantir ends out green as well, 84.91, up about 0.16%. Tesla at 292. The Tesla was at 275 earlier this morning, now at 292, up 3.91%. Google 172. Google got to 165. That's up 1.13%. AMD's up 0.35%. Rocket Company's up 14 at 1401, up 9.2%. Rocket Lab, that fell to $16 today at 2049, up 3.39% on the day. Celsius was down about 1.5%. McDonald's was down 0.5%. Marathon was up 6.02%. MicroStrategy was actually up about 6.4% of the day at 255. Not too bad. And that is because Bitcoin ends out the day, even though Bitcoin trades forever, at 84,000, up 4.66% on the day. That is we got as we end out this market. Martin says, very pleased with Rocket Lab. Yeah, I mean, if you're holding on to a ton of Rocket Lab, you got to be pleased with that price action today. It's not $30 anymore, but it's up from 15. And really, it's up within the time span of a couple hours to get there. Grab, by the way, 485. That's up 0.41% on the day. Microsoft as well, 396. Let's look at the Max 7. Amazon ends out the day up 1.5% at 211. Meta at 668, up 1.51%. Microsoft again, 396. And then we had Apple right here. NVIDIA was at 125. Apple, 241. That's up 1.73% on the day. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. What a freaking day. All right. So I want to pull up more of this coverage with Trump and Zelensky and kind of see what's going on here. I didn't even get to catch all of it. I saw certain parts of it, but here are the other parts of it that that we got going on right here. And then yeah, I mean, let me know in the comments, what do people think of this? I know we have a lot of Europeans in the chat. Did you like it? Did you hate it? I know we have a lot of Americans as well that are 50-50. Some people liked it, some people hated it, but obviously there was a lot of different perspectives here in terms of how this played out and what was being said versus what happened. Here's some other clips right here. Let me pull this up real quick. The White House actually was tweeting a bunch of these clips, so they have them kind of segmented. Real quick, here's what Scott Bessent said just after what happened, and then we'll get into the other parts of those clips. Arnie said, first time I saw the USA is strong. Wow. All right, so that's an Italian's take on it.
A negotiation with the President of the United States in public like this, that we were scheduled to have lunch afterwards, and that perhaps he could have brought up some of the points. Instead, he chose to let let things go into a downward spiral on worldwide television. And, again, I keep coming back to the disrespect of the American people. It was one thing for President Zelensky and I had an extended, heated negotiation in Kyiv, but we were going to get this economic agreement done. But when you bring it out to the public like this, we'll see if there's any coming back.
So the entire Trump administration kind of gearing behind this message that it was Zelensky who was disrespectful, and that is why they didn't get the job done. Here's what they had to say about NATO.
But NATO has to step up, and the Europeans have to step up more than they have. And I want to see them equalize, because they are in for far less than we're in, and they should be at least equal. You understand that? Why is the United States, we have an ocean in between. Why is the United States in for so much more money and other things as Europe? With that being said, and as you said, they've also been obviously very helpful, but we have put in far more than they have. And I think they should equalize. We're committed.
That was them talking about NATO. Here is another part of them. This is a little bit of a continuation from what we saw in the first video. So let me just play this right here. Going for this was when Vance was getting into it with him as well.
That if you will speak very loudly about the war,
he's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait
answer?
a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
you
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and you men are brave, but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have our military equipment, if you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
Less.
In 2 weeks. Of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said a lot of times thank you to American people.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on out here. I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
Thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
You're
running low on soldiers.
Listen,
you're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look. If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me.
For you what,
that wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person. That was with Obama.
It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
This was wild, dude. This was absolutely freaking wild. It was, I don't know, dude. It was one of those things where it's just like everyone's obviously super divided on if they thought it was good, if they thought it was bad. Originally, when I saw this break out, I thought the markets would like tank because they're like, all right, we're not getting the news that we wanted around peace. But that's not what happened. I mean, at least not today. We'll see what happens on Monday as we get into the month of March. But markets ended up to be pretty positive on this news. And I guess the only explanation for that is because they think that eventually there will be some type of peace deal that is going to happen. It's not going to happen today, obviously. Tensions are high on both sides. Zelensky was kicked out of the White House. Apparently, that's what the White House official text said, that Trump kicked him out and he didn't want to have the press conference. I'm sure he'll be invited back eventually when tensions cool down, but for now, it is pretty wild to kind of see how this is playing out. Here is what the professor had to think about this and what it means in the context of the broader stock market.
Your reaction to the events of today through the prism of geopolitics and what it could mean for this market?
Extraordinary. All I can say. Now, I think Europe was closed, but I think futures were open and they went down. I mean, I think a lot of the rally that we had seen over the past month and a half in Europe was partly because of hopes of peace. And I mean, that's looking further away, certainly, as a result of what we saw there. I mean, as far as impact on the U.S. market, I mean, you know, previous to show you've had some discussion on oil. It's really hard to tell how that will play out. I think Europe is going to be the main impact of this break between Zelensky and Trump.
What's your general sense about where this market is? Obviously, volatility has picked up recently. There are concerns over a slowdown in the economy, and certain areas and factors within this market have been quite upset lately.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. And I was watching 8:30, and everyone was watching the PCE deflator. I get all the data on my screen, and all of a sudden, that trade deficit came out. And I couldn't believe it. In fact, I thought it was a misprint. I mean, that's not only the biggest we've ever had in history, the change from the previous month was more than twice as great as any change we've ever had in the last 75 years. And I said, that's going to blow out GDP for the first quarter. Now, you know, first of all, I'm not agreeing with, I think the trouble with the Atlanta Fed, I mean, it comes out quick, but there's a lot of offsets to that. But almost every analyst is now down in the 1 range for GDP this first quarter, which would be the slowest in 2.5 years, which would be below the Fed target and much lower than we thought in early January. So, I mean, this is now, you know, a lot of what we, you know, trade deficit subtracts from GDP in the accounting. Now, a lot of that's going into inventory. So once we get all the inventory data, some of that is going to come back. But listen, we've seen slowing on everything. Retail sales were not good in January. Jobless claims jumped above 240. Housing starts were not good. Home sales were not good. There's definitely a slowdown. I mean, honestly, that's much more important, I think, to the market than really what happened to Zelensky today.
So the professor is talking about the PCE and the Fed Atlanta GDP data that came out today. Again, this chart, it's not misleading, but as soon as it came out, even during the day, you didn't see the markets absolutely tank, which is what some people thought would happen based on these real GDP estimates, because there's so much nuance to why Q1 GDP is negative. And if it actually ends up turning negative will be yet to be seen, given it is going to be contingent on Q1 trade, import, and export data. And if it ends up being negative, that doesn't necessarily mean we're contracting. It means to an extent we're contracting, but not for the same reasons that people would think, aka more unemployment, therefore people have less money to spend. It more so has to do with a preview of tariffs or a front running of imports before those tariffs. So I think there's a lot of nuance to it. That's why I think the markets didn't take it immediately as like, oh my God, we have to sell because the economy is collapsing type of stuff. But in March, we're going to get more data that backs up the thesis on this either being positive or negative. But eventually, you know, we're going to find out. It's hard to focus on anything today outside of what's going on with Zelensky and Trump. I mean, I didn't even post the Figure podcast on Twitter today. I texted Brett. I was like, dude, like the Zelensky Trump thing is it's kind of like the only thing that people care about right now. So maybe we wait another day to put out the podcast, because this thing is just, I mean, insane. I did not expect to see that in public like that, but ended up happening. And again, I see both perspectives. I read a lot of tweets over the past hour to try to see what the left is saying, what the right is saying. And it comes down to either you thought Trump was childish in doing that in public and he's isolating an ally, or you come on the perspective of, hey, we've spent $350 billion. The American taxpayer has no understanding of why we spent that much money when there are cities in the United States that are incredibly poor and isolated and they don't have the resources, but Ukraine is getting all our resources. And as a result, Trump finally stood up for the American people. I mean, those are the two perspectives. There's kind of no gray space. You either hated it or you loved it. And I guess the market's going to figure out if they hate it or love it over the coming months as well, based on what ends up happening. One take I did hear as well is that Putin potentially has to be loving this. I mean, he's seeing a rift between the United States and Ukraine. And obviously, as a result of that, he probably is happy because he wants to weaken the allyship versus not. Question simply becomes if this was actually a rift or if this was just a show for television in the meantime. This is what Balaji, who's the former CTO of Coinbase, tweeted. He says, "It is very bad when the other guys are coordinated and the home team is not coordinated." Kind of making the argument here that Russia and China are aligned, whereas the United States is not necessarily as aligned with who we would be historically aligned with, aka NATO. And that could be obviously very problematic for the broader economy and the United States in general. Fool's Gold, thank you for the $99.99 super chat. Really appreciate that. Real life, F around and find out when you take the money you need to do as told, but it sucks. That's life. I know that's definitely one perspective people were thinking about when it comes to Ukraine. And definitely people were thinking of this when Zelensky asked JD Vance, what do you mean by diplomacy? I think that's where Vance felt disrespected. Like the press conference was already quote unquote press conference. It was tense like the whole time, but those last 5 minutes when Zelensky was like, hey, JD, can I ask you a question? And JD's like, sure. And then he's like, what do you mean by diplomacy? Because you guys really haven't been that diplomatic. That's when JD switched and he was just like upset and wanted to kind of say, hey, you're being incredibly disrespectful about how you think the United States is going on diplomatically. Peter, thank you for the $20 super chat. He said, I love Trump's performance. Zelensky is entitled and ungrateful. The world leaders know now not to play with us. I think that's another perspective as well. Now, the opposite perspective to that is that world leaders are looking at this and they're thinking that they can't trust the United States anymore, which is one perspective I saw go around a lot today. The other perspective is world leaders are actually starting to respect the United States because we're not taking no for an answer. It's just like it is very polarized on which version of truth is going to play out. And I think it's going to take a few months to see how this ends up happening. I still think Russia, Ukraine, and the United States are going to get a deal done. And it's not going to happen today, obviously, but eventually that deal will happen. I don't think the war is going to continue indefinitely, or at least for the next 2 years. I think there is a peace deal, hopefully within the next 6 months. But today was not the day where it was going to happen. I mean, at the end of the day, these people are humans. The reason diplomacy is so hard, and the reason why not the United States, but the entire world, the history of humanity is filled with wars over diplomacy, is because people are emotional creatures that don't want to fight it out with our words, which is the more honorable way to go about disagreement. They want to fight it out by killing each other. And diplomacy is very, very freaking hard. And this was a perfect example of us looking at real life diplomacy that was not able to materialize in the way that I'm sure most people would have wanted it to materialize, which is a deal and a pathway to peace, because you had 3 people that got emotional. And that means on February 28th, the deal's not going to happen. A deal can happen in the future, hopefully does. But this is the sort of universal problem with the concept of diplomacy in and of itself. And we're going to see how this ends up playing out over the next couple months.